Curtis Yarvin's model of the cathedral does not accurately map the structure of power because he obfuscates his own tribe's influence. This is a problem because in order for the right to create meaningful political change, we must first understand who controls the levers of power and what their political agenda is, which Yarvin fails to do. Before analyzing why Yarvin's model is wrong, a brief description of the cathedral is needed. Yarvin himself has summarized the cathedral as being journalism plus academia. This description, however, is quite reductivist and does not flesh out the concept fully for someone who has never heard of it. In essence, the cathedral is a decentralized network of organizations and institutions that manufacture a liberal cultural consensus. It is not a shadowy cabal or a syndicate, but rather it is the alignment of the universities, the journalistic and entertainment media, the public education system, the federal bureaucracy, and NGOs all working to promote progressive liberalism. According to Yarvin, these institutions are aligned and do not compete against each other because they share a common religion, and because the nodes of power hold to the same religion, they reinforce each other's authority. Just as the Catholic Church shaped medieval Europe by dictating its religious values, so too does the cathedral coordinate the nodes of power within our society by instilling them with the religion of progressive liberalism. Within the cathedral, a priestly caste of managerial experts interpret liberalism and their dogmas become sacrosanct, not dissimilar to how bishops and popes interpreted Christianity for the whole of Europe. Universities then teach the cathedral's approved form of liberalism, just as monasteries taught Rome's approved version of Christianity. Furthermore, within the cathedral, journalists and the mainstream media police wrongthink by smearing right-wing dissidents, not dissimilar to how the Inquisition policed heresy by sniffing out and hunting heretics. There are other analogous elements between Yarvin's cathedral and the Catholic Church, but these examples are enough to give the gist. So why is Yarvin's model incorrect? The problem with Yarvin's analysis is that he does not acknowledge that the people who run the institutions in his model are disproportionately Jewish. Yarvin's model postulates that the institutions which comprise the cathedral push the same ideas because they share the ideology of progressive liberalism, and can reinforce each other's authority by marching in lockstep. But this obfuscates who controls the institutions and what their political agenda is. The reason these institutions share a common ideology is not because they realized that they could all reinforce each other's power. It is because the same group controls each of the institutions and uses their control to dictate what ideas the institution promotes. It is not hard to show that one group, which Yarvin happens to belong to, controls the organizations and institutions that he talks about. On screen, you will see a rogues gallery of members of this group who are a part of the Biden administration. For reference, both Jews and Native Americans each constitute 2% of the US population. However, a person is hard-pressed to find any Native Americans in Biden's administration. Most people likely couldn't name 3 of them unless they Googled this specifically. But the other group, meanwhile, while also comprising 2% of the US population, inundates positions of power at the highest level. This phenomena is not exclusive to government. Similar names can be noticed in the other nodes of power that Yarvin outlines in his cathedral model. Yet Yarvin's model makes no mention of this fact, and as a consequence, misdirects his audience as to how power functions, which is the exact raison d'etre of his model in the first place. Another hole in Yarvin's theory has to do with monetary policy and the financial apparatus of America. Yarvin's model has little to say about who runs the Federal Reserve or why American politicians of both parties are funded exorbitantly by AIPAC. Contrary to what many Americans believe, the US government does not print its own currency. Instead, a private network of banks print US dollars on behalf of the government and then loan them to the government on interest. Administrators of the Federal Reserve are not voted on by American citizens, and are thus wholly unaccountable to the people who theoretically elect their country's leaders. Germane to Yarvin's theory, the people who run the Federal Reserve belong to his tribe, the same tribe which his model doesn't recognize as holding power, and the same people who have ran the Fed since its inception in the Wilson presidency. Regarding AIPAC, it is most curious how 2 parties which are supposed enemies are able to find universal consensus when it comes to giving aid to the State of Israel. The Democrats and the Republicans fight like cats and dogs over most issues, but when Bibi Netanyahu gives a speech in Congress, politicians of all stripes realize who funds their campaign and clap like circus seals. Yarvin's model does not address this issue. The State of Israel is not one of the nodes of power within Yarvin's model of the cathedral. By following his model's logic, there is no deeper reason as to why Netanyahu receives a record-breaking number of standing ovations when he gives a speech to Congress. Nor is there an explanation for why two opposing politicians like Chuck Schumer and Ted Cruz are funded by the same people. Yarvin's model insinuates coincidence. As for whether or not he is right, I will leave it up to you to be the judge of that. In conclusion, Curtis Yarvin's theory of the cathedral is a flawed model of how power functions, because it does not recognize the role of the Israel lobby and his own group. Him overlooking this aspect of power is significant for myriad reasons. A false understanding of how power functions is most destructive to a political movement, and if the right wishes to ascertain power, it must examine the power structure of America as it really stands. Yarvin's model fails to do this, either intentionally or unintentionally, and as a consequence, obfuscates how power functions to his readers.